Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour on Saga 960. An incredible pleasure of mine tonight to introduce you to Mayor Frank Scarpitti, who is the mayor of the city of Markham, an unbelievably interesting guy. He's been elected mayor 4 times. He's been elected by the citizens of Markham 9 times. He's the second longest serving mayor in the history of Markham. But his biggest claim of fame, I got to tell you, I'm completely belief of this, is that he was vice president of the Markham District High School Students' Council when I, yours truly, was the president of the Students' Council. Mayor Scarpitti, how are you, sir?
Great to see you again, Brian. And this is a bit of a reunion today. So this is wonderful to be able to chat with my former high school president. And, I filled your shoes after you left, and it was such a great experience at Markham District High School. It was a fantastic school. And, along with a few others, Martha Mingay and Serena Rab and some others, probably inadvertently, you didn't realize you had an influence on me to get engaged back in those days in high school. And I know some people say, was that the beginning of your political career? I say, no, I don't think it was. But it sure didn't hurt, and it sure taught me a lot getting involved and making a difference within a high school, and obviously that's been expanded out to include a whole community.
And you made a great difference. You were a preeminent person in high school. I remember you involved in so many things, and then you ran for Town of Markham Council. When was that?
Well, that was back in 1985, and so my goal actually was to kind of pursue a career in the media, and had started down that path, and was at the time in the early 80s working for our local cable company at the time, which was Classicom, and then turned out later to be bought out by Shaw Cable, and then a bit of a switch with Rogers and Shaw, and so Rogers served the area. But it was a great opportunity for me to in some respects extend my engagement in the community by interviewing people, by covering events back in the early 80s. And you'll remember this name, as I know many from Markham will, and certainly beyond Markham, because he had an influence in the political world and also in the Conservative Party, and ran ultimately as an independent MP. But the former late mayor, now Tony Roman, was really the person that tapped me on the shoulder and said, I think you should run for Markham Council. And there was a by-election in 1984, a by-election actually in the ward that I grew up in. I sort of told him at the time, no, this isn't for me, certainly not right now, maybe down the road later on in life. And he kind of tried for a while, and wasn't successful the first time around. But about a year later, when we had the general election, he came back at me again. And then I think he kind of circled the wagons, because I couldn't go anywhere in the community without someone coming up to me and saying, have you ever thought of running for council? And I'd say, Tony Roman has spoken to you, right? And so he had a wonderful influence that way. And I've seen, look back at some of the pictures back in the day. I don't know what he saw in me, but because as I said, wasn't really concentrating on pursuing any political position, wanted to pursue a career in the media. And then I thought in 1985, yeah, sure, I will run. I think I can do as good a job, or maybe better than some of the folks that are there. Wanted to run, and back in the day, and it still is, in York Region, just like Peel, where it's a 2-tier system. You obviously have city council and you have regional council. And I just wanted to run in a ward, being my first time. And so I was waiting for one of the ward councillors to move up and run regionally. None of them did. And so I thought I had a better shot at running regionally and winning one of the 3 seats than going up and against an incumbent in one of the wards. And the rest is kind of history. And I really, to this day, thank Tony for the influence and perhaps the insight that he had. And it was a real honor for me, actually, at the beginning of this term, to invite Elsie Roman, Tony Roman's widow, I celebrated 30 years of public service on Markham Council at the beginning of this term. And so I invited Elsie Roman to come and place the chain of office on me, really honoring the person who had that influence and got me into politics in the first place.
That's a great story. I don't know if you know, but my father was on the board of education. So he was a local politician in Markham as well. You and I knew each other through student politics. I campaigned against Tony Roman because I was not of his political persuasion, but I played football with his son, Mike Roman. And so I've got some memories of the Roman family as well. But, 9 times, that's a lot and 30 years, and 4 times as mayor. That's a pretty successful career, sir.
Well, you know what? It's an incredible community, and you think back in the day, even when we were in high school at Markham High, none of us ever would have imagined that Markham would become what it is today. It was certainly a great community to grow up in. We did have great schools back then. And for me, I grew up in what's known as the conservation area, and those from Markham would know, and those outside of Markham certainly would know where Markville Mall is. So just east of there and south of there. And we had the Milne Conservation Area as our playground. It was a great spot to grow up as a kid. Drove our parents a little crazy sometimes because we'd disappear for hours on end. But just a great community to grow up in, and certainly it's evolved. And even in my time on council, some people sometimes ask me, do you not get bored with this? I mean, you act sometimes as if this is your first term on council. And I think part of it is just the way the community has grown, how it's evolved. We're the most diverse community in all of Canada. We've welcomed people all over the world. People who've come here, highly skilled, highly educated. And so it's a real vibrant place on so many different levels. And I really, I think as much as you can say I've had a successful run in politics over the last 30 years, I'll say in large part it's been the collaboration, the working together of councils of the day, the mayors of the day, but also the community. I think, the community is really what inspires me, because they challenge us to do better, which is great. And they also lead by many of the initiatives they get involved in and get behind. And so it's made for an interesting ride, that's for sure. And I'm very proud of the record.
You got a big presentation coming up about exactly this, I think, about your vision for a big urban vision. And I'd like to chat with you about that. We're going to take a break for some messages and come back more with Mayor Frank Scarpitti from Markham about his big vision for the city of Markham. Stay with us. Welcome back to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour, Saga 960. As any of you that listen to me frequently know, I'm really interested in urban development, and I wanted to reach out to Mayor Frank Scarpitti of the city of Markham. He's got a big presentation coming up that he's titled, I think, Your Big Urban Vision. And I want to know, what are the component parts about it? I grew up in Markham when I think it was a population of 2,000 people. Maybe it was 4,000, I can't remember. And it was a little sleepy farm town that was on the outside of the outskirts of the city of Toronto. You went through a lot of farmland before you got there. It's changed, and it's changing a lot more. So what, sir, is your big urban vision for the city of Markham?
Well, there's a couple of different components of it. And again, this is a shared vision. Some of this has been put forward by members of council, again, the community. And it's all of us working together. And to be honest with you, in some respects, a response by to other levels of government and the things that they've asked us to do. But back many years ago, Markham participated when we were putting a bid together. Atlanta finally won the Olympic bid, and they got to host the games. But we were part of the Toronto bid, and we were trying to get a sports complex here in Markham back in the day. And after Toronto lost the bid, we started to take a look at a very significant piece of land between Warden and Kennedy Road, north of the 407, south of Highway 7. And for those that may not know the area quite well, but maybe you've been to the Hilton Suites Hotel at Warden and Highway 7, it's really all of that area in and around that hotel. But we saw that as a sort of a hole in the donut, because many years ago, the province used to have a Parkway West Parkway Belt plan, and it reserved all of the lands where the 407 sits today, where the future transit way will go along the 407, and other utilities. And so they froze way more land than what they needed. But over time, they released that land, and we saw the potential to create something different. So that's now known as Markham Center. It's an incredible community. I know we use, and it gets overused sometimes, but we want to create a community where you can live, work, and play. And so we have companies like Aviva, Honeywell that's currently there. IBM has their major software lab in the area. York University just broke ground on a new campus that will be built there and open in 2023. And most recently, and I say most recently, certainly in history, we had the Markham Pan Am Center built there when we participated in the Pan Am Games back in 2015. So we are creating a real hub, a vibrant hub. And I guess we're fortunate too, lucky, in that we have a beautiful jewel, the Rouge River, that flows through this Markham downtown area. And of course, we're going to have trail systems in through that area. So I look outside my window at the Civic Center, and I sometimes pinch myself because, yes, it's higher density than you and I, and certainly many who came to Markham at one time ever thought would be here. But I actually think we're doing it right. We're getting the right scale, we're providing the right amenities, and the quality of development is something we demand from our developers. But we want to truly create a vibrant, but a wonderful, strong relationship, a sense of place. And to quote one of the people that works for one of the developers in the areas, he's heard me talk about this before, and he came up with this term, island in the skies. And we don't want islands in the sky where people just pull into their underground, go up to their 500 square foot condominium and go back down the next day, go off to work, and there's no sense of community. Quite the contrary. We want to create a place on the ground where people will not only get out of their condos, but people from other areas will go to, because it's a place of destination.
Now, you've got some great main streets in Markham already. The main street of Unionville, the main street of the old town of Markham. What's going to happen to those? Are they going to be decimated as you build this new downtown to Markham?
Well, you know what? We're very proud of those streets, but we're also proud of a number of heritage areas within Markham. And Markham was the first community in Canada to win the Prince of Wales Award for heritage preservation. We also won the Lieutenant Governor's Award for heritage preservation for a community of our size. So absolutely, and not only have we protected the main streets, Brian, I hope you'll come back, because you won't recognize Main Street Markham in what we've done. We reinvested in the road there, obviously, but invested in the urban landscape. And it was a real struggle, I have to say, when we were going through the construction. Construction's not a pretty sight to begin with. But, when you're dealing with old plans and you get in to replace all the infrastructure, pipes that on the drawings were supposed to be in one location ended up being in another, dragged on the whole process. But let me tell you, when it was all done, and you're sort of sitting there the night we had the official opening, which coincided with the Markham Village Festival, which you'll remember. Afterwards, I'm just sitting on the sidewalk looking down the street and thinking, this has got to be now, one of the top 10 main streets in Ontario. So we've enhanced that. Main Street Unionville, again, a real jewel with the heritage buildings, the Varley Art Gallery that's been built at the foot of the street, a wonderful Millennium Band shell, again, reinvesting in the street, and we're about to do that again because it was actually back in the mid 80s when just before I got on council, that a big enhancement program had been undertaken. We buried the hydro lines, and now we're going back in and improving the streetscapes there. So absolutely, not only the main streets, but the heritage areas, we take a lot of pride in protecting those.
So I congratulate you for protecting them. But I guess you had an option to build the density there. And, I think about Mississauga, where Port Credit, Streetsville, et cetera, also nice old main streets, but they're actually building big density, particularly down in Port Credit around the GO train station, et cetera. You're choosing to build your density in a brand new spot. Can you build a new downtown to a city?
So I think when you take a look at the fact now, we're over 360,000 people. Over the next 25 to 30 years, we're going to grow to over 450,000 people. The whole community, in many respects, I know there used to be quite a separation when you and I were going to high school between the village of Markham and the village of Unionville, and it'd be a bit of a trek to get from one community to the next. Those communities have grown. And so there's certainly still a focal point of those main streets within those communities, but also other brand new communities that are all around those streets. And I think you've captured it quite well. We have deliberately, certainly on Main Street, Unionville, and to the same extent, not quite the same extent, on Main Street, Markham, we have allowed for redevelopment that's in keeping with both the historic buildings and the feel of those main streets. But to the north on Main Street, Markham, like once you get north of 16th Avenue, where our beautiful Markham Museum is, there's a GO station up there. We've allowed for density in and around that GO station, but that's removed from Main Street, Markham. On Main Street, Markham, we restored the old Markham Village train station and didn't allow density around it. So yes, we've protected it, we've enhanced our streets, and we've allowed the redevelopment to happen. Excuse me.
So what's the secret? What's the secret to building this new downtown? You talked about you've got this athletic facility that came because of the Pan Am Games. I know you were actually thinking about getting an NHL team in an arena at some point in time. You've got York and Seneca that have, I think, built facilities there. You've attracted a bunch of corporate offices. And you've also got a GO train station there, I believe. And so, density, transit, mixed use, are those the keys to developing?
Well, you can have intensification, you can have all of those uses, but what is absolutely critical is that we have rapid transit. Urban sprawl has its drawbacks for sure, but intensification without rapid transit is going to be a disaster that's much worse than even urban sprawl. So when you take a look at Markham Center, and I talked about that area between Warden and Kennedy, north of 407 to 7. The original plan actually called for about 25,000 people. A number of years ago, we updated the plan. It got raised to 40,000 people working in that area, another 40,000 living there. Now we're updating that plan, and we've increased the area by about 30%. But there's projections now, we haven't finalized it, that population in that area will be over 100,000 people. Well, you can't have that type of intensification without rapid transit. So what's critical on that one is the 15-minute GO service that we will get into Unionville GO station. And when you have 15-minute service with the capacity of those trains, you reach the type of subway capacity. In fact, you may even surpass it, depending how frequent they put the trains in for. But what's planned for right now is 15-minute service. The other part of the city that is also going to undergo a transformation is Yonge and Highway 7. And when you take a look just on the Markham side, south of the 407, when we approved Langstaff Gateway, and that was over 10 years ago now, that was the most densest community in all of the GTA. And I'm not sure there's anything that's been approved that's higher in terms of density. That particular area is extremely dependent on the young subway being extended all the way up to Highway 7. And that's something that I've been advocating for now for the past, several decades, but more intensely over the last few years, because the time is right. We need to take off Yonge Street those 3,300 daily bus trips that are packed with commuters who are inefficiently making their way down to Yonge and Finch. And because of the ridership that is currently there, and also because of the intensification that we need to see happen, it does rely on rapid transit. So that's got to be the backbone of any area that sees that type of intensification.
Okay, so let's unpack this a little bit if we could. So on the current line that comes up to Unionville and onto Markham, I believe today you only have service that goes downtown in the morning and uptown in the evening, and so it's certainly not every 15 minute. What is it going to take to get your every 15-minute two-way all day kind of GO train service on that line?
Well, actually, so we do now, finally, and we may have even been talking about it back in high school, not as much as later years, but we'd been pushing for all-day GO service, and we only got that within the last 5 years. So there are trains now that do go throughout the day and on the weekends. Service obviously has just been cut back because of COVID, but we finally achieved all-day GO service. What it is going to take is and what's happening now along that line is improvements in the infrastructure. The double tracking, that needs to happen. Some of the overpasses, there's a major overpass that's being built right now at Kennedy and Steeles. That's needed because of the frequency of the trains and the volume of traffic on Steeles Avenue. So, it's been called different things by different governments, but that regional express rail, the investment that needs to happen is critically important for the future growth. But again, if we want to see transit ridership go up and for transit to be competitive with the car, you need rapid transit, and that investment is being made and progress is being made, and that's the only way that you could ever imagine that type of community being developed, by having a rapid transit system like that. And then on the other side with Langstaff at Yonge, it is that Yonge subway extension all the way north to Highway 7.
The complaint on the Yonge subway extension is that the Yonge subway is full already, and anyone in the city of Toronto is not going to be able to ever get a seat if it's filled with people from Markham. It was extended to Vaughan on the University line, and that part of Vaughan is just taken off. The number of towers and the condos, the density there is incredible. If you actually get it extended and you get any increased density, even without the increased density, does that make sense? And some people have argued the alternative would be to do on that Richmond Hill GO, similar kind of frequent service to Union, and get people to take a GO train from Richmond Hill down to Union rather than crowd on the subway. What do you think of that?
Well, a couple of things. One, some of the inherent problems of capacity actually are within the city of Toronto itself because of some of the developments that have been approved downstream. Two things. First and foremost, the Yonge subway extension north to Highway 7 is the most justified rapid transit project in the GTA. And I know you're smiling and you'd expect the mayor of Markham to say something like that, but there have been other projects, and I'm okay with this because at the end of the day, those projects too will form part of the rapid transit network that we're going to need in the GTA. But there have been other projects that were advanced ahead of the Yonge subway, even though they didn't have the ridership that we have today on Yonge Street. Why? Well, one, because, and I do believe this, one, because those were also projects important to creating the rapid transit network. And then two, like anything else, some projects make their way and get advanced, and sometimes there's political influence, and there's nothing wrong with that as long as the money is being spent in the right places. And when you take a look at the Eglinton line, when you take a look at the extension of the Spadina line up to York University and into York Region, those were great investments because they form part of the rapid transit grid. Look, we've overtalked this subject so much over the past few decades. We used to be the envy in North America when it came to subway system. Many communities in the United States blew past us many years ago because of the investment of the federal and state governments in mass transit. And we've had, unfortunately, governments of all stripes, provincially and federally, not pay attention to this. So number one, kudos to the provincial government for their plan to expand subways throughout the GTA. Kudos to the Prime Minister recently announcing $15 billion that will go towards transit in the next 8 years, with $3 billion a year being permanently in the budget so that we don't give up our status in terms of improving transit right across the country. So getting back to your question though, a couple things. There were dollars allocated to improve Yonge and Bloor and the way that whole station works. It's inefficient. And if you go to any other country, you'll see that it doesn't sometimes take a whole lot of dollars to improve efficiency with a few measures that are put in place. And by the way, when we used to have a representative on Metrolinx, we supported the $400 million signalization system that improved the efficiency of the Yonge line because it needed to be done. And we knew it needed to be done to help facilitate the extension of the Yonge subway itself. But since then, both federal and provincial dollars are going into improving Yonge and Bloor, which is a bottleneck. The other important piece is the Ontario line. And again, to all of the people involved, from the bureaucrats at the province to, again, the political leadership at the province to Metrolinx now, for pursuing the Ontario line, which in many respects will serve much better than any other previous alternative that's been presented before. The fact that you'll have a line that will hook into the Ontario Science Centre, the Eglinton Crosstown, bring that line all the way through to the east side and come down through the downtown core and connect it all the way over to Ontario Place is brilliant. That's a true relief line. And so when I say that number one, York, the Yonge Subway Extension is the number one project, I recognize that it doesn't stand alone. It's part of that network, and we need to continue to build that network to connect all of the communities throughout the GTA.
We're chatting with the Mayor of Markham, Frank Scarpitti. Mayor Frank Scarpitti. We're going to take a break for some messages and come back more with the Mayor in just a minute. Stay with us. Welcome back to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour. Having a good chat with an old friend of mine, Mayor Frank Scarpitti, I apologize, the mayor of the city of Markham. Mayor, you've talked a lot about north-south connections. What about east-west? I went to Markham a little while ago, and Highway 7 was like a disaster zone, building something down the middle of the highway. What's going on?
Well, I don't know when that was, because that's, certainly in Markham, that section is completed now. And by the way, Highway 7 was designated one of the most beautiful streets in North America by a leading magazine, which the name escapes me right now. And they showed magnificent pictures of our bus rapid transit system. And that's a very important link when you take a look at the developments that are happening in Yonge and 7 that I described earlier, Markham Center, which we've talked about, and all the way out to the East End in Cornell, which we're building a new bus terminal out there, 11 Bay bus terminal, which will be the terminus for the bus rapid transit system when it gets extended. And again, for those that have been to Markham Stouffville Hospital or the Cornell Community Center, they'll know the Cornell community very, very well. So that east-west link is very important. That's within the region, and ultimately we'll connect, and we're working on that now with Brampton to connect to their system along Highway 7, that they'll be able to utilize the bus rapid transit system. And back when we were looking at options to provide a rapid transit system locally, we reviewed the investment that would have been needed and the options that we had. We ultimately decided on a bus rapid transit system because you could almost achieve the same capacity as a light rail system at a third of the cost. And so again, we've been very responsible in how we've utilized the dollars invested by the provincial and federal levels of government. And what we have now is a dedicated lane, state-of-the-art stations. You know, many years ago, people used to ask me who would ever stand in the middle of Highway 7 to wait for a bus. And, you know, interesting enough, I think we've created a friendly human urban environment, and it works very, very well. And as time goes on, obviously, those corridors along Highway 7 will also be transformed. And that's important for the region. But I think more critically, and something that is a little further away, but again, given the time that it takes for these projects to come to fruition, really, when you take a look at the fact that we're going to be adding over 3 million people to the GTA over the next 25 years, the east-west transit corridor that goes the whole length of the 407, I believe, is going to be an important piece of infrastructure that we have to start focusing on. And for that one, Brian, certainly governments can help, but I actually think that that's a great opportunity for a public-private partnership. You know, when we're talking about the extension of the Yonge subway, that's to an existing line. It becomes, I think, more challenging to have a multi-jurisdictional arrangement. Not that that's impossible, but the 407 transitway is ripe for some kind of public-private partnership because it's a brand new line and would connect to many of the north-south lines that we've been talking about, not just here in York Region, but in Peel and out to Durham.
Is that supposed to be a bus or LRT or subway or GO train or what?
So the environmental assessment is completed for a large chunk of it, and it was planned as a bus rapid transit way. On that one, though, given the length that commuters would be traveling, I think we should go back and revisit that one and see if there's justification, again, with a public-private partnership to actually build a light rail system right out of the gate, an autonomous system. I was on one in Japan, smaller cars, frequent service, clean, efficient, and no drivers, totally automated. And again, I think it's that type of system that would serve us very well along the whole length of the 407. And I know with the growth that's going to happen in the GTA and with the critical dollars, and I know there's been a lot of debate about where to spend those dollars and what type of infrastructure we're going to need as the GTA grows to another more than 3 million people over the next 30 years. That's something I think we need to begin to look at.
You know, you talk about 3 million people. To put it in perspective, it's been described to me that a population the size of the city of Montreal is moving to Toronto in the next 20 to 30 years. And you think about the kind of infrastructure that Montreal has, that's what we've got to build over the course of the next little while to accommodate that kind of development. Mayor, the other thing that I heard is that you're talking about some sort of an innovation center. Tell us about that.
Well, a couple of years ago at Collision, which is one of the largest tech conferences in North America, that came to Toronto for the first time a couple of years back. And we'd been thinking about some future employment areas, and we thought, what a great backdrop to announce a new innovation park district in Markham, which we call the Markham Innovation Exchange. And anyone who's driven up the 404 will recognize the Honda Canada building on the 404. It's really those lands in and around that area, a little bit to the north and certainly to the east. 1,900 acres, again, where we hope to attract green tech, high tech, incubators, certainly some other educational institution. And it won't be a Markham Center. It's not going to be Langstaff where you have residents and businesses together, understanding though that it will look and feel differently from the employment parks that we've had in the past. These big, huge void, I'll call them employment areas where, they serve their purpose and there's still a need for some of that. But going forward, we really see this as an area we're going to be able to capture the new industries, but also create an environment where those employees will want to come to work there. And so it's an exciting area, and hopefully in the next, hopefully less than a year, we'll have our first phase that we'll be able to announce. And I think it's going to be a great start to that innovation district at the north end of Markham.
What's happened to the Buttonville Airport?
So Buttonville Airport certainly was scheduled to close a couple of years ago. Cadillac Fairview, in partnership with the Sifton family, were looking to redevelop that area. I was very impressed with the plans. We approved those plans locally, and this is both the sometimes trials and tribulations of having a two-tier system where you've got a local municipality and a regional municipality. So you have to kind of get through both. And I know when the plan was going through at the region, there were a number of infrastructure issues that were trying to be addressed. And we thought we came up with some good solutions to those locally. Again, trying to work in the regional context and with neighboring municipalities, we couldn't pursue some of the solutions to dealing with the traffic that would have been generated from that development. And then also, even prior to COVID, I think Cadillac Fairview was really trying to figure out where retail was going. They were planning a mixed-use development, primarily employment, major convention center, hotel, and a shopping center, but a different type, a higher-end shopping center that could attract some of the clientele within York Region and certainly here within Markham. And so between some of the requirements they saw on one end, some of the shift that was happening in the retail sector, they kind of took their foot off the gas pedal. And right now, the Siftons are looking for a new partner to come in, potentially buy the whole parcel. And they'll be working with the city to hopefully stay as close to that vision that we saw, because I thought it was an exciting one and a great way to develop a key piece of land right off the 404.
We've talked about city building and innovation. We've talked about transit. We haven't talked about highways. And when I grew up in Markham with you, I think there was no 407, and I think the 404 ended at Steeles or something like that. So the 407 and the 404 extension has really led to a lot of the development that you've talked about prior to transit. What do you think about highways? Should the 404 connect to something in the north? Should there be a 413? What do you think about highway building in and around your area?
Well, when you take a look at the population growth that we're going to have, and some experts say that that's probably on the low end when we say there's going to be an additional 3 million people. There's no doubt that some of that growth will go into these intensification areas. And so where that's happened and you have rapid transit, absolutely, transit will service those areas. I think we have to be careful about this one. I know I know that there's some pretty pristine areas that people have certainly raised awareness about them, and that's a good thing. But I think we also have to be careful. We when we think about a network, it's about a network not just for cars, but for goods as well. and making sure that those goods can move not just within a city, but through a metropolitan area like ours. And so, I think at the end of the day, and we don't have access to all the data, but at the end of the day, provincial highways are really the responsibility of the province of Ontario. And just like transit, just like we've pushed them and we're getting there, and there is a commitment now to invest in more transit, that's happening, and that's a good thing. But at the end of the day, we recognize too that there will be communities that will continue to grow. They'll continue to provide some of that ground-related housing that people also want. And so it's about, if you could satisfy the marketplace totally within high-rise building, I guess part of that would be that we start to impact built-up areas in existing communities. And we made a very, very deliberate decision a number of years ago that we were going to have high-rise buildings and intensification in certain designated areas supported by rapid transit. We didn't want to go into established neighborhoods and start to inject high-rise development within those areas and start to impact those areas, particularly when they're not close to rapid transit. So we made a very deliberate decision. I think we should stay focused on that. I think Markham and York Region are poster childs when it comes to intensification and where we've planned for intensification. But could you imagine if someone had tried to stop the extension of Highway 404 into York Region 30 years ago? Where would we be today if that highway had not been extended? How would our communities function today without the 407? So highways do play an important role, certainly for people to get back and forth to work. And there has to be a greater focus on transit, because I've been advocating for that. And absolutely, we need to spend more dollars. I'm not sure we're at a point, and this is up for debate, but again, I think it's one that the province has to demonstrate the need for any highway. I'm not sure we can totally turn our back on continuing to improve the highway network. Yes, you'll be able to accommodate commuters on transit, but at the end of the day, the goods and the services that people rely on, they also need a good transportation network. And are there other solutions? They should be presented. It should be debated. But at the end of the day, you can't have, as you said, the size of Montreal, that population move throughout the GTA and not expect that there's not going to be improvements to the overall transportation system.
Well, and I got to tell you that I'm a biggest supporter of transit and increased density around transit nodes in the city of Toronto and in 905. And I think you're doing a great job in that regard. But that said, there's always going to be some people that want a single family house. And that's one of the dreams that a lot of people have and want to still have. And it's unaffordable in the 416 for a lot of people today, and is probably becoming unaffordable in some of your areas. I don't know what it's like just north of you, but the projections are that Caledon, which is north of me, is supposed to grow from 50,000 people to 500,000 people over the course of the next 10 to 20 years. And if you think about 500,000 people in Caledon, there's no way you can do it with the current highway system, and for sure the current GO train service. And so I think the 413 might make sense. It unquestionably needs to not invade as much of the Greenbelt as may currently be proposed. But frankly, I think it's not doing that much. And farmland, same thing. But the 413, and I think someone like you should be campaigning for it to not stop at the 400, which it currently is proposed to stop at, but go to at least the 404 to connect the 404 up. If not, frankly, to Highway 48. But I'll leave that for you to decide. We're going to take a break and come back with some concluding comments with the mayor of Markham in just a minute. Stay with us. Welcome back. What a fascinating conversation we're having with Mayor Frank Scarpitti, the mayor of the city of Markham. He's been elected as mayor 4 times. He's been elected 9 times by the citizens of Markham. He's someone I admire. He was a good friend, and I hope, Your Worship, I can still call you a good friend. You're an amazing gentleman. I loved working with you on Students' Council, and I have watched very closely your career in politics. I got to ask you though. There was this rumor, I think more than a rumor, that you were thinking about running for regional chair of York if the regional chair was going to be an elected position, which was proposed for a while at one point in time. I had this fascinating conversation with former Premier Kathleen Wynne and former Mayor Hazen McCallion and Ann Golden, who had written a report in 1996 about the GTA. And she said the only way we can govern ourselves is to get away from 29 cities around the city of Toronto and the city of Toronto getting together to talk about what's going on. It's a recipe for disaster. What we need to do is merge York into one city, Durham into one city, Peel into one city, and Halton into one city, and have 5 cities that make up a new metro or Greater Toronto Area Council. And that's the way we should run it. And if you did that, Peel would be 1.2 million people. Your city, York, would be, I think, close to 1 million people. You've got, Halton would be close to 500,000 people. Durham, the same thing. You've got cities of substance. You'd have not just the 1st and the 6th and the 8th city in Canada. You have the 1st, 3rd, and 4th size city in Canada. What do you think about that idea? What do you think should happen with governance? Should regional chairs be elected, and should York be amalgamated?
So I will just start off by saying this year, and I guess Peel would be the same, because it all got formed at the same time with Darcy McHugh, regional government. It's 50 years this year, and one has to ask yourself, when you think 50 years ago, what our communities were like, how our communities not just have grown, but how more complex they are today. All the issues that we have to contend with, the different investments that we're making, whether it's in district energy or some of the technology that we use to serve clients. It's in many respects a totally different world than it was when regional government was first formed. So you have to ask yourself, think of all the organizations that have evolved over those 50 years, and yet we still have the same governance structure after all this time. And so it really does beg the question, what changes do need to be made? And, I think we were expecting some changes. This provincial government did a review, I guess, a little over a year ago or so, and ultimately decided to, other than a few tweaks here and there, leave things alone. So I think we do need to take a look and review. And when you see what happened in the city of Toronto with the council being reduced in size, it seems to be working well. There, different points of view are still reflected. Obviously, there's a greater focus on the people that get elected and the job that they're doing. You don't get to sort of blend into the background when you have fewer representatives, but I think that's a good thing because it keeps people accountable. So absolutely, I think we need a review. There needs to be a streamlining. That option is one that I've certainly talked about, creating some super cities around the city of Toronto and coordinating things much better. And so no system is ever perfect, but I think when you think of how we've evolved and changed over the last 50 years, you do have to ask yourself, how is it that we haven't really evolved the governance structure that currently serves our communities throughout the GTA?
Mayor, you've always been a visionary. If you had to think about one big idea that we haven't talked about yet that would change the Greater Toronto Area, what would it be? Fast trains to Montreal? Hyperloops? Electric cars? What's your dream? What's your vision to change things?
Well, in some respects, it's all of the above that you just said. Our world is becoming a smaller world, a much more connected world. And it is important to create communities where people feel safe, they feel at home, they feel welcomed, they feel that they have every right to be a part of the community and engaged, and that this is their community. I'm proud. I wear it with a badge of honor when I say that we're the most diverse community in all of Canada. We've been blessed by the fact that so many people have come here from different parts of the world, highly skilled and highly educated. I want to see that diversity, the opportunity for collaboration to build the most vibrant, clean, safe, leading communities in the whole world. And we have that potential to do that here. And as long as I'm blessed to be able to serve, I'll certainly work with our communities and other political leaders to make that happen.
Mayor Frank Scarpitti, Mayor of the City of Markham, it's a real pleasure to chat with you. Thank you, sir, very much for joining us. Anytime you want to come back and talk to our listeners, feel free.
Thank you, Brian.
That's our show for tonight. Thanks for joining us. Good night, everybody.